Good evening, everybody. This is Lee McKnight. I'm the residency administrator for Saluda Residency, and this is the public meeting for the US 17 360 Tappahannock Boulevard Church Lane Corridor Study. Route 17 is the main road in the town of Tappahannock. It is also a corridor of statewide significance for moving people and goods throughout Virginia and outside the state. 17 and 360 run concurrently through the town of Tappahannock from Queen Street through Brays Fork. This study will examine safety issues for motorists, pedestrians, and other travel modes like bicyclists and bus riders. It will also examine traffic congestion and access spacing issues. And through this study, we will recommend improvements to address these issues. It is important to note that this program is the first step in identifying the safety and operational improvements needed. Once those improvements are identified, funding may be applied for. This study is part of VDOT's Strategically Targeted and Affordable Roadway Solutions Program, or STARS program, in which VDOT planners and engineers work with local planners and stakeholders to address critical safety and traffic congestion challenges at key locations throughout Virginia. The STARS program seeks to develop innovative safety and operational transportation improvements that can be programmed in the VDOT 6-year improvement program. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Jeannie to get us started with the presentation.
Hi, welcome. My name is Jeannie Alexander, and I am one of the engineers working with VDOT on this study, and I'm excited to show you guys what we've been working on. So before we get too far into this, some housekeeping things. This left portion of your screen should be familiar. It's the email you received to get you here. So you've already done that step, so good job. To the right, you'll see the panel that you should see on your screen with this meeting. We have already muted you, so you don't need to mute yourselves. Toward the end, when we get into some discussions, there may be an opportunity to use this raise your hand button to ask a question verbally. We'll see how things are going at that point. Below that, though, is a pretty important space that you can enter in questions. In this top area, you can see questions entered by others into this chat. And then below it, you can enter your question if you have one, and we will, at the end of the presentation, go through those questions and hopefully we can answer them for you. So these are the things we're going to go over. Lee touched on many of these. Why is this corridor being studied? How did it rise to the top of the list? There are a lot of roads in the state of Virginia, so how did this one get to this point to be looked at closely? And that ties into what the issues are. We'll talk about some of the issues that were already mentioned and some other things in more detail. Then once we've talked about the issues, we'll also talk about solutions and see what we can do to try and alleviate some of the challenges that exist along this corridor. We'll also touch on how the recommendations from this study could be funded, and then the next steps. You can see this is the corridor that Lee mentioned over here, highlighted in yellow. All right, so why is this corridor being studied? So Lee mentioned the STARS program and what it is, the Strategically Targeted and Affordable Roadway Solutions program through VDOT. These studies work in partnership with the local governments, in this case, Essex County and the town of Tappahannock, and also the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, trying to pull everyone in on this important corridor. So this corridor starts to the north at Airport Road. You can see that northern, all the way at the top of the screen, blue dot, and then goes all the way to the south to the LaGrange Industrial Drive, this purple dot at the bottom. So this is the area that we're talking about tonight, this yellow highlighted area. It's roughly 3.5 miles long. It's got some distance to it. There are 9 intersections that have traffic signals along this corridor that we're looking at, and then there are 11 specific locations that do not have traffic signals that have been highlighted to be studied. One of the reasons why this has risen to the top is that 5 of these intersections have been identified as having a potential for safety improvements. This means that they have a higher crash rate than would be expected. And we'll get into more detail about that as I go through the presentation. Also, some access spacing deficiencies have been identified in various portions of the corridor, and we'll get into more detail about that. And I believe, Jessica, do we have a poll for you guys?
Yes, we do.
We do.
So,
all right.
I'll go ahead and launch that poll. The question is, here we go. How often do you travel on US 17 360 in Tappahannock? Do you travel it every day? Maybe a few times a week? Maybe a few times a month? Or less than once a month? Go ahead and click on your responses. We'll keep the polls open for just a few more seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the responses. So it looks like the majority of folks attending travel on US 17 360 every day.
Great. That's great. All right, thank you guys for offering some input. We'll have a few more of those polls throughout the presentation just to check in. It helps us have an idea of your involvement in this corridor. Clearly, you're very involved. You drive it every day, and also gives you an opportunity to be engaged. All right, so what are the issues in this corridor? The issues have been identified with a combination of data and analysis and also survey responses through a survey that was given late spring, early summer of last year, and I'll talk about that in detail with you guys. So the primary issue identified in this corridor and the cause for it to be studied is the crashes, I suppose. This first map here is what we call a heat map. And what it illustrates are the crashes intensity in certain areas. So the area shown in yellow at Queen Street and Church Street has the highest intensity of crashes in the corridor. And then you can see it fades out to red, which is a little less, and then blue being the least number of crashes in the area. I mentioned before that there are 5 intersections that were identified as potential for safety improvement locations. And these are locations where, based on the roadway characteristics, the traffic volumes, other details about the road, the number of crashes at those locations is higher than would be expected. And you can see up in the northern end, there are 3 up here. One is at Queen and Church, then there's also Queen and Cross, and then Duke and Church. And then as you travel to the south, Winston and 17 is one of the PSI locations, as is this bottom one is actually Ball Street right here and Route 17. All right, so that survey I mentioned, hopefully many of you took that survey last spring. We'll ask you about that in a little bit, but that survey ran from May 7th through June 4th, and there were over 1,100 participants, which is good participation for a survey of this type. What this chart here shows is the result of the question that was asked of the participants about which issues are the most important in this corridor to you. You can see it on the vertical axis. The most important is number 1, least important is number 5. And then along the horizontal are the 5 different issues that the participants were asked about. Based on the feedback from the participants, the traffic congestion was the issue of the most importance, then followed by roadway geometry, vehicle safety, access spacing, and then the pedestrian and bicyclist safety. And actually there's one more on my screen. Whoops, sorry about that, guys. All right, and vehicle speeds. All right, having a little trouble here getting the next slide, but do you guys still see my screen out there?
We do, yeah.
There we go, next slide. Okay, so more survey responses. The survey asked participants about each of these issues, one of them being congestion. And the question was, where did you experience congestion in this corridor? And the question was phrased such that it was before COVID, because this survey was administered in spring of 2020. So it was, I'm sorry, 2021. There were still some irregular traffic patterns, and what we really wanted to get at are the typical traffic patterns. But the result of this question about the congestion indicates that the congestion is mainly north of Hoskins Creek. You can see that 32%, followed by in the northbound direction. Now, these are not exclusive, so it could be northbound, north of Hoskins Creek together. And then also the southbound direction was also indicated, as was south of Hoskins Creek. So that while those weren't as high, it's an indication that many drivers experience congestion throughout the corridor. When asked about safety, respondents indicated the following areas of concern. Congestion was the greatest, then followed by actually road maintenance, which is interesting. And when I have been out there, I've not experienced this, but clearly this is something that the drivers who are there daily do experience. And then speeding, as well as distracted driving, some other things make up aggressive driving behaviors, make up many of the things. Unfortunately, aggressive and distracted are really, those habits are hard for us to fix with this type of a project, but we know this is an issue, a universal issue when it comes to driving safety. All right, when asked about access. So the participants were asked, what are the issues with driveways and entrances? The overwhelming issues were about slowing to turn off of the main corridor, off of 17 onto a side street or into a business, and turning on. So it's that entering and exiting. And this is likely a reflection of the lack of turn lanes in some locations. And then some closely spaced intersections and driveways are also shown to be an issue with the vehicles blocking entrances, that 22% that was shown to be challenging with the access. When asked about multimodal issues, what improvements were needed, pedestrian issues clearly rose to the top. 27% expressed an interest in sidewalks, followed by crosswalks and pedestrian signals. And then an off-road shared use path was also indicated. When asked what mode of transit is needed, aside from the bicycle and pedestrian, most respondents indicated a similar need for bus and park and ride, followed by the carpool, vanpool, and other. And unfortunately for other, we do not exactly know what that is because they could not write in what other indicates. All right, well, there we go. Okay, the next portion of the survey focused on a map exercise, and participants were asked to use a map and drop pins, click on the locations where they found different things to be problematic. So for the whole survey, there were almost 1,900 pins marked for various types of things. You can see that 1,898 markers were placed. Those were spread out through those issues I just discussed a moment ago. Most of them are related to congestion, then followed by safety, and 14% expressed concern about the driveways and entrances, followed by walking and biking, other issues in transit. What's nice to see here is that this also lines up with that very first slide with the graph. Congestion was first, and then it kind of came down to these other issues in a similar fashion, that the participants are responding consistently. So this map over here to the right indicates where all the markers were placed. So this covers all of the different issues, all of them are placed. And for those of you who all drive this every day, it's probably not a surprise that the highest number of markers were placed up here at Queen and Cross. And then they kind of decrease as you go to the south a little bit near this Wright Street area, and then just north of the creek, that bridge, coming down then to the Walmart, Ball Street area, and then to Brace Fork. We also have these responses broken down. Bear with me. There we go. Oh, I think we skipped a slide. There we go. Sorry about that. By issue. And this generally reflects the same trend that was on the total slide, which makes sense since these added together make that slide you just saw. But the congestion issue the main issues right here at Queen and Church, and then there's also, as you go just a little bit further south, kind of in this Wright Street area intersection, and then it tapers off as you go to the south. Safety, also the main location was noted at Queen and Church and secondary at Wright, and then it kind of jumps down a little bit to north of the creek, the PSI locations, and Brays Fork. As far as driveways and entrances go, you can see that the number of markers, there aren't any red ones in this, so not as many locations were specifically marked. Same is true for bike, ped, and transit. Again, most of the concern about driveways and entrances is further to the north. This one's a little interesting. They kind of surround the Queen and Church intersection instead of being right at it. And they continue in the same locations to the south. And then bike, ped, and transit is very similar. The markers for needs or in the downtown area was the main focus, and they taper off as you go to the south. All right, so the final portion of this survey asked the participants demographic information. So the map over to the left shows where the respondents indicated they lived, their home zip codes. The red portion is the highest intensity. That's almost 30% of the respondents live in the area immediately surrounding the corridor, which is not surprising. And then it fades out like the rainbow. From red, it goes to orange, which is fewer, roughly 13% just over the river, to the yellow, green, and blue. It is noteworthy. This covers quite a large area that people took the survey from, so it's interesting. The respondents were also asked, do they live or work near the corridor? And nearly all do. Actually, I misspoke on that one. I apologize. Not all do. Nearly half do. And it's interesting that this large group that travels through also took the time to take the corridor. So the information got out about the survey, and it's very helpful. And speaking of the information getting out, the participants were asked how they found out about it. No surprise, Facebook was the major way with 82% of the respondents. That's how they learned about the survey. And the internet coming in number 2 at a much smaller percentage though. When asked about their race, 85% of the respondents identified as white. This is slightly off of what we expect based on census data here. So it's a challenge to reach all the communities and get everyone represented. It's something that we're working on for many studies throughout the state, but it's noted that it's something to work on. And then when it comes to the age groups, I think 70% are 45 or older, which is not surprising. This is the group that is active and participates more so. I do find it encouraging that there were people in that 18 to 24-year-old age group that took the survey. It's nice that it did engage all ages except for that 0 to 17, which is just fine because they're hardly driving. And I believe, Jessica, we have another poll.
Yes, we do. So we want to know, for those folks on this meeting tonight, did you take the first survey for this study back in May or June of this year? We want to know if you were one of the folks who maybe put a marker on the map or responded to the questions, or if this is your first time kind of hearing about this study. So I'm going to close the poll in just 2 more seconds. Okay, and the responses are that most people did not take the first survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's really interesting information. When we get to the end of the presentation, there's another survey out there for you to take now that will be based on the information we're about to cover, and hopefully you guys will take that, but we'll show you how to get there in just a moment. All right, so based on the data that we've discussed, the survey responses, here's a summary of the issues that we're looking at in this corridor. The crashes, they tend to cluster around the intersections, especially those 5 that were noted as the PSI locations. There are also access spacing deficiencies that lead to some of those crash clusters in some cases, and increase that crash potential with many driveways and intersections. Congestion in downtown Tappahannock was noted. We also found this to be the case with our traffic analysis. Heavy truck traffic, while the survey results as shown didn't indicate that is an issue, there were comments written about this, and also based on observation, we know that the heavy truck traffic headed from the south over the bridge to the east and then in that reverse direction is present and is challenging based on the roadway network, especially because there are narrow travel lanes, which makes it really tough for the trucks to maneuver and vehicles together in the downtown area, especially. One of the other issues noted was the need for pedestrian facilities, the infrequent crossings and sidewalk gaps. And you can see actually in this picture of this woman walking, and it'd be nice if she just had a little more protection and there weren't a utility pole right in the middle of that sidewalk. One of the good things that's nice when this happens is that the survey responses were consistent with what we found in our analysis. There weren't surprises, so it gives us a better focus on what to address. All right, so now we've talked all about the problems and what everyone has seen out there. So let's talk about some solutions. All right, so you all know this corridor really well since you drive it every day, and you can picture they're very distinct portions of it. So what we've done to talk about the solutions is broken it into these different areas that have very different characteristics. So we're going to focus on the downtown Tappahannock area, and we have a couple of options there to discuss, including some one-way streets and another option we call partial quadrant. Then we're going to jump to the south and talk about the Braze Fork area, where we have two options, including a roundabout and a green T. And then the area kind of between Richmond Beach Road and north of Braze Fork that we're calling the south of Hoskins Creek area, where we have some access changes, some median modifications, and some pedestrian improvements to show you. All right. So now talking about downtown Tappahannock. So this area, this blue circle up here, so you don't lose track of where we are. That is what we're starting with. And, well, maybe. So back to the issues here, the high crash frequency. So this is the area that has the most of those PSI locations, one of them being Queen and Church, one of them being Queen and Cross, and the other being Duke down here and Church. This is also the location in the corridor with the greatest amount of congestion, focused around that Queen and Church intersection. And we mentioned that truck traffic and the narrow travel lanes are also challenges in this area. Okay, congestion. Many traffic studies, congestion is the main focus. In this case, safety is a bigger focus. However, in this portion of the corridor, congestion does play a greater role. So what this graphic shows is in 2045, we expect that the traffic backups, what we call queues, at the Queen and Church intersection will extend to these areas where these orangish yellowish arrows are. Ideally, these backups would stay within the lanes provided and not extend through adjacent intersections. Once they start to spill back, it creates quite a ripple effect of congestion. It also creates some safety issues. So addressing that's one of the major issues in this area. So we looked at many different options here, and we are not going to go through all of these with you because many of them turned out not to be viable. But just to let you know that many things were considered before we arrived at the alternatives we're going to show you. So one of the things we looked at were just conventional turn lane improvements. What happens if you change one lane to a through and a right, or you add 2 left turn lanes, things like that. What we found with those types of improvements is it was very challenging because of the trucks to effectively address that because they need so much space to turn. So there weren't very many of those options. And then also when you start changing lanes, the congestion got worse and those backups that I showed you were quite a bit longer. Another option we looked at is what we call the road diet. And that is where you kind of slim down your roadway. So Church Street in this area is 4 lanes. 2 per direction, 2 northbound, 2 southbound. And for one of the road diet options, we took that down to 1 lane northbound and 1 lane southbound with turn lanes. And you can probably picture that here at Church and Queen, that many times it would probably be seem very helpful to have just 1 northbound through lane and 1 northbound right turn lane. Unfortunately, what we found is there is just too much traffic on this road to be handled with 1 lane per direction in the throughs. So we took that and then we said, hey, well, what if we go 2 lanes northbound and 1 lane southbound? It's still a road diet of sorts. Unfortunately, that one didn't work either. So we moved on to other options. And this is where they get a little more complicated, because these options extend beyond just Church Street. When we talk about quadrant roadways, the idea is, say, when this example with Southeast, is that you use Cross and Prince, or say Cross and Duke, to form a quadrant and use those roadways for some of the traffic that goes through this main intersection. So we looked at a number of iterations of those in the southeast corner, those in the northeast corner, the use of Cross and Duke and Prince. And we have one of those that I'll present to you in detail. And then we also looked at one-way pairs, the idea of creating a network of one-way streets in this kind of downtown area. And I'll get into more detail about that too. So one-way pairs. So there are a lot of words here. I'll walk you through the words. You don't have to read them, or you can if you want for reference. So what this option does with one-way pairs is it converts Church Street from Queen down to Duke to one-way southbound. Then it also converts Cross from Duke to Queen to one-way northbound. So you can get your northbound and southbound traffic using those 2 roadways. On Queen Street, from Cross to Church, traffic is only allowed in the westbound direction, so away from the bridge. And then to offset that, on Duke Street, traffic is allowed in the eastbound direction only, from Church to Cross. So what this really does is, say you're coming from Brace Fork, headed north, you would come up to Duke Street, turn right, then you would turn left on Cross Street, and assuming you're headed over the bridge, then you would turn right on Queen. If you wanted to just go north, you would similarly turn right on Duke, left on Cross, then turn left on Queen and go around. That is the most circuitous or out of the way movement of those in this area. Some other things worth noting here are that if you're coming from the north and headed south, you cannot turn left onto Queen Street. This movement is forced to come down here and make the left at Duke and then kind of come around. So that one is another one of the movements that becomes a little bit longer in this option. Some of the other pieces of this, the traffic signal at Queen and Church is relocated to Queen and Cross to handle the left turns there. And the traffic signal at Prince and Church is no longer needed with the change in the one-ways in that area. Also worth noting is that in this alternative, Prince Street remains 2-way. So traffic is allowed to go both eastbound and westbound on Prince Street. One of the perks of this option is that by taking Church Street from 4 lanes to 3, you have more space for the travel lanes because those are quite narrow, but that also allows more space for sidewalks, so they can be a little wider because it's very tight in that area with the sidewalks up against the buildings. This also was shown to reduce travel times, which therefore reduces delay, moves things through more efficiently. And I think most notably about this reduces the number of conflict points. This is where vehicles cross paths and therefore there's a potential to have a crash. And if you recall, 3 of these intersections, the Queen and Church, Queen and Cross, and Duke and Church, these were already indicated as potential for safety improvement locations. And by reducing the number of conflict points, that could improve the safety. So I know this one was a lot. We can come back to this at the end if you guys have questions. All right, so this is what we call the partial quadrant, a different option for the downtown Tappahannock area. This one, compared to the one-way pairs, allows two-way traffic on Church Street. So it would still have two southbound lanes on Church between Queen and Duke, but only one northbound lane. And the reason that this can be accommodated is because in the northbound direction, if you want to turn right and, if you were turning right at Queen and wanted to go over the bridge, you do that now at Duke as in the other option. So you turn right on Duke and then turn left on Cross and right on Queen. All of these streets in this scenario are two-way, which varies from the one-way option. This one also, because it brings down the number of lanes on Church Street from 4 to 3, allows for wider travel lanes and some widening of the sidewalks. This one also reduces travel time expected through the area, and it also reduces the conflict points, or it reduces helps with the safety and reducing crashes at Church and Queen. It does not have a significant impact at the other two PSI locations just because of how those are configured. And Jessica, I think we have another poll here. Is that true?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and launch that poll. This one is asking, of the concepts that Jeannie just described for the downtown Tappahannock area, which one do you like the best? The one-way pairs, that's where Queen Street was one-way southbound and Cross Street was one-way northbound, or the partial quadrant, where Church Street has the 2 lanes southbound and 1 lane northbound, or is do nothing preferable? You like it the way it is, or maybe you don't quite understand the difference between the one-way pairs and the partial quadrant, but you don't want to do nothing, do something. So go ahead and select one. We're asking you to select just one. Which of these concepts do you like the best? And I will close the poll in 2 more seconds. Okay. 42% say do nothing. 26% say do something, but I don't quite understand the options. 21% for the partial quadrant and 11% for the one-way pairs.
Interesting.
And Jeannie, we do have a couple questions coming in on the questions box. Do you want to save those for the end, or do you want to answer those questions now?
Well, are they all applicable to this downtown area?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Let's address those while we're here. And
Okay.
I am not able to see those.
I can read them to you if that's okay.
Okay.
So the first question comes from Michael Lombardo, and Michael asks, regarding the one-way pairs, did you examine the cut-through traffic on Marsh Street as a result of not being able to turn left on Queen for southbound traffic?
Very good question. We did not specifically reroute any traffic based on that. It is actually this alternative shows that you can't do that. It's one way north at that location, so it would prevent that from happening. So I think that probably covers that one.
Okay. Meredith Tribal asks, what about parking on Cross? Like all the buildings and businesses would lose all of their parking.
Yes, that actually great. I forgot to highlight that, and that is on these slides. That is one of the disadvantages of these alternatives, is that the parking on Cross Street between Prince and Queen is removed in both cases. You can see these little marks here. Those indicate the parking spaces that remain in the southern block. Let me look at this one too. And you can see it's, in this one, actually, there aren't any. And there's a slight possibility we could squeeze in a few in this southern block in the partial quadrant, but you're correct that there's an impact on the on-street parking on Cross Street with all of these, with both of these.
Great. two comments were about trucks. John Harvey asks, have you considered the fact that traffic, oh, I'm sorry, that one's not about trucks. John, I'll come back to yours in just a second. Cyan says, are you suggesting that traffic, including 18-wheelers, be diverted through the residential and historic areas?
Yes, that is what we're suggesting. And that is why we want to get your input on these ideas, because it's a change and it's different. And this is the downtown area.
And another related to truck, Margaret Taliaferro says, have you addressed the possibility of a truck route around town?
So I have heard discussions in not related specifically to this project about a bypass that goes around the area, which I believe is what you're referencing. And maybe that is something that we can have someone from VDOT address at the end of the presentation, because there's more they have more background than I do. That is not something that we are specifically looking at in this study.
Good. Let's see. John Harvey asked, have you considered the fact that traffic coming from Fredericksburg will want to cut through and take a left on Prince Street?
So we, not necessarily specific to Fredericksburg, but coming from the north, you can see there are some restrictions here, which is, it's not intuitive. What's shown here, these little islands that are intended to force you to go down here to the signal at Duke and make the left there. That is the intention. Or actually in this case, you can turn left at Queen. But yeah, so we're trying to create these alternatives in a way to not have them take Prince when we're trying to actually get them to take Duke. So yes, I guess we have thought about it and we are trying not to let it happen with the design.
Good. Another one about trucks, Meredith says, also many trucks that come from across the river cannot make those turns. We are their sole gateway. Also for a pool company that can barely make the single right turn.
Yes, so it's hard to tell from these graphics, but we specifically tested the trucks and made adjustments, and there's some adjustments to some corners here on some properties to allow for those trucks to make the movements, because we understand that that is one of the greatest challenges in this portion of the study is coming up with traffic solutions that trucks can actually maneuver through.
Okay. We have quite a bit of questions continuing to come in. I think we can take a couple more, and Eric typed in that, can I walk through how to submit a question, please, for those who are having trouble? It's a bit tricky to figure out. The interface may be a little bit tricky, but on your control panel, there should be a questions box. There's also a chat box. You can use either of those boxes to raise a question. But if you find your control panel on the GoToWebinar where it says questions or where it says chat, then there should be a type message here, and you can type your question in that way. Jeannie, maybe we like two more sure. Questions or comments, and then we will save the rest for the end, but I know okay. We do want to get on. So Meredith Tribal, more of a comment than a question, just says that the road needs traffic calming methods such as varied paving at crosswalks and middle turn lane to address the glare at stoplights and not having clearly marked roads.
All right. Thank you for that comment. That's interesting.
And one more comment from a question from John Harvey. Tractor trailers will need to make 4 turns. I presume this is with the Is this with the one-way or the partial quadrant, or maybe with both, versus the way it is now? And have you factored in crashes with this?
So they will have to make more turns. They're at low speed, and especially in this other scenario, oops, wrong way. The number of points where the vehicles cross, those conflict points I mentioned, are fewer. So we would expect the crashes actually to decrease.
Okay. I'll encourage folks to continue typing in your questions. We will record all of them and we'll come back to this at the end if we have enough time. But for now, Jeannie, let's move on to the next section.
So the good news is that was the most complicated of all of the alternatives and potential recommendations of this study. Now we're moving down to the southernmost area where Brays Fork is, down here, this blue circle. And we have a couple of ideas to share with you here. So before I hop into the ideas, a reminder of what the issues are. So one of the main things we've heard through the survey, through discussions with the study work group, just working on this project, is that if you're coming from the south and you want to go to the hospital, it's very challenging once you get your green light to come through here and then hop over 2 lanes to turn right when you're in conflict with this southbound traffic coming from downtown Tappahannock. So that is one of the major issues here. And then there are also these closely spaced intersections and crossings at Berry Hill and this other maintenance area up here. And it's unusual, which can create some confusion for drivers, specifically down here at this Berry Hill location where this eastbound, these guys coming around this curve stop here, but not everyone realizes they need to stop and this traffic doesn't, and there's some crashes concentrated in that area as a result. So this first option that we are considering to improve the traffic situation at Brays Fork is what we call a continuous green T. And you can see it gets its name from the fact that it looks like a T. It's sideways in this case. Some things to note about how this works. So if you're coming from the south, going north, you don't stop. You just keep going as you do today. You don't go through the signal. You keep going up here, and eventually you merge back in with these 2 lanes of traffic. If you're coming from the west, so going eastbound, and you want to go north, you stop at the traffic light, just like all of them, and turn left. If you want to turn right, you now come up here and turn right instead of taking the ramp. Well, I guess that's kind of a ramp down here that exists today. Coming from the north, all of the traffic comes through the traffic signal to go straight or to turn right. One of the things this does, if for that particular movement I mentioned, if you're coming from the south and you want to go to the hospital, you stop here, you get your green light, and you're not in conflict with these vehicles because you have the right of way with your green arrow. And then you can easily hop over to the hospital. Some of the perks of this are it reduces travel times. This isn't, congestion was not necessarily a big issue at this location, but it does improve the traffic operations. It also reduces the conflict points, the opportunities for collisions down here at Berry Hill, because part of this is to propose removal of this median crossover here and making this Berry Hill a right in, right out, which reduces those opportunities, and also removing this crossover here at this maintenance area to get some distance from that signal before there's some other conflicts. And the second option that is being considered is a roundabout. Similar to the continuous green T, if you're coming from the south, going north, you get to keep going. You don't go through the roundabout. You just carry on and eventually you merge back in with these vehicles. If you're coming from the south and headed, say, to the hospital, you come through the roundabout and you have the right of way, so you can choose that outside lane and then hop in the right turn lane to turn right at the hospital. So it addresses that issue. This also reduces travel times. And actually, I'll go through the rest of the movements. I apologize. Eastbound, the right turns don't go all the way through the roundabout. They still kind of come around at a little tighter angle in this case, which slows things down and improves the conditions at Berry Hill. This location, for this opportunity, we also remove that crossing at Berry Hill. But this one also reduces the travel times. Things operate very nicely and smoothly from an operations perspective. It also reduces the number of opportunities for cars to collide because, as noted here, roundabouts, they generally reduce crashes due to a combination of reduced speeds and the reduced number of opportunities for vehicles to cross paths. And with that, I think we have another survey.
Yes. So for Brace Fork, which of these concepts do you like the best? The roundabout that Jeannie just talked about, the continuous green T intersection that that keeps the signal but is configured a little bit differently, or do nothing? We'll keep the poll open for a few more seconds. And I will close the poll now and share the responses. So 45% prefer the continuous green T, 40% the roundabout, and only 15% prefer the do nothing.
All right, interesting. It's very close. Interesting. Thank you for participating. And now, so this is the final section we're going to look at, and this is a little different. So this area is the area between Richmond Beach Road and just north of Brace Fork, as shown here with this blue circle. In the previous areas that I've talked about with you, they were kind of either or options. In this area, that is not the case. We're going to show you a combination of improvements that include some median modifications, access changes, and pedestrian improvements that they're not exclusive of one another. You can pick and choose which ones could work to your liking. So what were the issues down here? So there are two intersections in this stretch here from White Oak to Richmond Beach Road that had the higher crash rates than expected, the PSI locations, one at Winston Road and the other at Ball Street. Also in this area, it's worth noting there's some closely spaced access points, which I'm going to highlight those in a different analysis we did in a moment. And there's a lack of pedestrian facilities. There aren't any sidewalks. It's very hard to cross, even at the signals. So it's just not a pedestrian-friendly area. All right, conflict points. I've mentioned these a little bit, but they become more important with the options we're about to talk about in south of Hoskins Creek. So as I've noted, the conflict points are the ways crashes can collide. And you can see in this top illustration that there are 32 of these points at a typical intersection. The fewer conflict points there are, the fewer collisions you would be led to believe. And you can see the second illustration here with the directional median opening, eliminating those left turns from the side has a pretty significant impact on the number of conflict points, coming down from 32 to 10. And then if you were to convert a median opening or intersection to a right in, right out, it reduces the number of conflict points to 4. And oh, there we go. So VDOT has standards about access spacing, which these standards are great when you're designing a new road. They are more challenging to meet in a case such as we're looking at here on US 17 and 360 because the corridor is developed already. The signals are where they are, median openings are where they are, and driveways are where they are. This is a goal that would be great to meet, but it's understood that coming back, you can't force fit the road to meet these standards. But just worth noting that these standards exist. And they apply to the spacing of traffic signals, median openings, driveways, and they do correlate to the speed. And these are the ones that are appropriate to the 35 and 45 mile per hour section of the corridor, not the slower area, the lower speed limit area, the 25 to the north. And so keeping those numbers in mind, what we did is mapped out throughout this portion of the corridor all of the driveways. See these white dashed lines, the distances between them, and then also the locations of signalized intersections, median openings, unsignalized intersections. And from these graphics, what's most noteworthy is if the number has a white background, it meets that VDOT standard that I mentioned. So right here, this is a great stretch. These look good. However, as a black background, it does not meet that standard. And it's not surprising when it seems as though there are many driveways over here that these do not meet that standard. Most of the signals are spaced within that standard. There's one place where they're a little closer than would be desired. But I'm going to scroll on. So this is the southernmost area. North is to the right. This is Brays Fork to the left. And you can see this is that intersection at White Oak, that first traffic signal as you're going north. And then moving to the north, this is that next section. Here's the traffic signal at Ball Street. Again, north is to the right. And this is the Walmart traffic signal. And again, you can see that these signalized spacing, these numbers have the white. So this traffic signal are spaced fairly well with this one exception, but that these driveways are quite close together. So trying to consolidate some of those would be helpful. And this ties back to that feedback from the MetroQuest survey too, that there are a lot of driveways and it's difficult turning in and out of them at times. So then extending further north. So this is Hobbs Hole right here for reference, and Winston Road here. You can see again that these signals, this orange line, these are spaced pretty well, but again, there are many driveways closely spaced throughout the corridor. You can see this is the section from here to the north is 35 miles per hour, and here to the south is 45, but the same standard applies for both of those. And it's also worth noting that Winston Road was recently changed, and we'll talk about that in a moment too. So I mentioned that Winston Road recently, that median was modified into what is referred to as a reduced conflict or restricted crossing U-turn. It has a variety of different names, but that is what's illustrated here. And what this really does is from the side street, so from Winston, as you know now, you can't turn left anymore. You have to turn right, and then you go make a U-turn and come back. And if you think back to that conflict point diagram, this significantly reduces the number of conflict points at the location, and therefore improves safety, we hope. I would be interested to hear what you guys have to say about this improvement in Winston when we get to the comments, when we get to more discussion. And well, there we go. Just hitting home with the conflict point and crash rate, or access point and crash rate correlation. So in this corridor, there are roughly 3.25 traffic signals per mile. So I'll tie that in a moment. But this graph shows you the crash rate along this vertical axis versus the number of access points. And this line highlighted in yellow is when it applies to this corridor. And you can see that the more access points, the further you travel to the right in this chart, the more crashes per million vehicle miles that occur. So there's a direct correlation between access points and crashes. So by reducing the access points, you can help reduce the crash rate and improve the safety. All right, so all of that to get to this. So I realize this is small and there's a lot of information. So I'm going to try and hit on the high points. And also, so you guys know, all this information is on the project website if you want to get a little further into it, and you can provide additional comments and we'll show you where to find that. But some of the highlights here, I'll start with the pedestrian improvements. So at all of the signalized intersections, we propose to add crosswalks, pedestrian signals, curb ramps, in this case, refuges, so that you can have a place to stop in the middle on the median. We also are proposing this yellow on, this is the east, again, north is to the right. So Brays Fork is on the left. It's not on this picture, and downtown Tappahannock is to the right. So on this west side of the road, this is a sidewalk that is shown to give pedestrians a safe place to walk. And then we've also shown a shared use or multi-use path on the east side of the road. That's what this kind of pinkish color indicates. Some of the other things that we're showing as possible recommendations are the installation of that restricted crossing U-turn, the R-cut at this intersection of Ball Street and at the Walmart. The traffic signals would remain. However, if you wanted to turn left from the side street, you would turn right and then go down and make the U-turn. And then also in this area, we're proposing a new R-cut for that purpose, for that U-turn, because the next one is a little too far away. So we propose to add one here. Also, you can see that there are proposed closures to certain driveways. For example, right here at Goodwill, they have access onto Sycamore Drive, and focusing that traffic here rather than having these two driveway points. It's one example, but that's what these boxes are changes to driveways. And then also you'll see these potential cross-access connections. This allows you to go, say you're over here at McDonald's and you need to get over here to the plumbing supply store. You can travel through the parking lot to get there instead of hopping back onto 17 to make that short little trip, likely at a lower speed, to do that. This illustration also shows the Wawa that is proposed at this location to most accurately reflect where things are headed in this corridor. And I think that highlights most of, the changes that we're suggesting in this area. Moving to the north. So this picks up where that other graphic left off at Teakwood. Again, Brace Forks to the left, downtown Tappahannock to the right. And you'll see we propose to continue the sidewalk again along the west side all the way through this stretch to eventually connect to the sidewalk that exists north of Richmond Beach Road. And then also the shared use path continues through this area. And you can see in this stretch, there aren't as many changes to driveways and entrances. They're just not as closely spaced. There aren't as many of them. But there are some that we think you could probably do without. And it would be better for traffic conditions on the corridor, and also some potential connections in this area too, where these adjacent parcels could connect to one another. And I believe, yes, with that, I think Jessica has the final poll for you guys.
Yes, so this is multiple answer selection. You can choose one or more answers. Which of those concepts that Jeannie talked about do you like for US 17-360 south of Hoskins Creek? You can select one, you can select all, although if you select all, then you're kind of contradicting yourself because the do nothing implies that you're not going to do one of the three above. But Jeannie talked about modifying the median openings with those reduced conflict U-turns, like as what's there at Winston Road now, adding sidewalks and crosswalks, consolidating driveways and entrances, or the do nothing. Looks like we still have some responses rolling in, so I'll keep the poll open for a few more seconds. Okay, I'm closing the poll. So adding sidewalks and crosswalks, 76% of those who responded selected that. 71% of those who responded selected consolidating driveways and entrances. 43% selected modifying median openings, and only 10% of folks selected the do nothing.
All right, thank you. That's interesting. So there's definitely, you would like to be able to walk and make left turns from the side street at the intersections. Thank you for taking that survey, for that poll. All right, so I guess the next question is, this is all great, how would it be funded? So this study is really the study. There's still the design of any recommendations that would need to be done, and then also the construction. VDOT has a number of funding mechanisms that could be considered depending on the types of projects that come out of this Some of them have a match from the locality that's required, others don't. Probably the biggest pot of money is Smart Scale, and that is likely what would fund the improvements, most of the improvements that come out of this study. All right, and next steps. So some of you have already done this, I think maybe most of you, to ask questions of us using the chat function, or the other way you can do it, the questions. This is where tell us your thoughts. If you leave here, think of something that you would like to comment on that you didn't say tonight in the meeting. This email address, fred.comments@vdot.virginia.gov, is available to you. Put US 17/360 in the subject line, and that would be helpful to make sure it gets to us. But this is where you can provide comments you may have at a later time. I believe if you don't recall this, I think on the project website, you can also find that. Also, the next survey is live, and we would love it if you guys would take the survey. It also shows these options that I stepped through with you guys tonight, and lets you rank them against one another, consider, you can rate them independently, but really give some thoughtful feedback, including comments on what you've seen and what you think would be best in this area, especially since you guys drive this every day. We really would like your feedback, and share that with your friends, share that with your neighbors, share that with your coworkers, get the word out about that survey, because it is really valuable information. You saw the information that we got from the first one, so we look forward to getting that from the second one. And in addition to that, if you would like to reach out to someone from VDOT, Linda Lasute is the project manager for this project, and this is her contact information. And I'm going to leave the screen up for you guys. Michael Lombardo, who has chimed in with some questions tonight too, is with Essex County. He's the county administrator. And then we have two different folks you can reach out to at the town of Tappahannock. We've got the mayor, Roy Gladding, and then also the town manager, Eric. So feel free to reach out to them too. But we really take that survey. We'd love to get your input through that when you can look at these alternatives with more time, and think them through. And with that, Jessica, I am done. I'm gonna leave this screen up in case you guys wanna make note of any of these, the websites, the survey, the contact information.
Great. So we've got quite a few questions coming in, questions and comments, so that's great. Linda asks for clarification, when does the survey close? And that's November 5th. So you have a few more weeks to respond. And I put the link to the survey in the chat box. So if you're feeling up for it and you'd like to take that survey now, feel free. You can also view some higher resolution versions of the images that Jeannie was sharing through the MetroQuest survey. So if you have some questions or you couldn't quite see, you'll be able to see those images at the MetroQuest survey. We have had several questions and comments raised about a bypass. Have we considered a bypass, as other counties have done? A bypass connector from Mill Road to near the airport would mitigate all of this. Will you explore a bypass especially for trucks? And so I'm wondering if Jeannie, or maybe if I can call on Stephen or Linda or one of the other VDOT folks to talk about the bypass.
Certainly. I'll take a shot at that. Over the years, probably at least once every 10 years, we visit the idea of a bypass. The most difficult part of that, of course, is the cost. Would be a lot. To bypass from Brays Fork to the northern end of town, above downtown area, would be about 3.5 miles. It would cross Hoskins Creek, large wetlands area it would have to span. And in doing so, you could bypass Route 17, but then you would also have the 360 traffic still coming across the Rappahannock and going through the downtown area. So we would assume, of course, that would be a western bypass. If you went to the east, of course, that would probably involve Rappahannock crossing. So anything you do would be fairly expensive. There may be some other options. The reason we didn't look at that with this study, of course, is this is a STAR study, which involves strategically targeted and affordable roadway solutions, and those wouldn't involve things that are probably on the and don't quote me on this, order of magnitude type of cost could range from $50 to $100 million, probably the upper end of that, to build a bypass around town. So that'll keep coming up, and based on some of the traffic that we saw in 2045 and those queues getting longer, I'm sure we'll keep talking about it in the future.
Great. Eric asks a question related, this is now back to the downtown area. Why would Cross Street have one right turn lane rather than two? Jeannie, you might want to go back to the images to answer that question.
I'm gonna do my best to get there. Oh, geez. We will get there eventually, I promise. All right, so was this the one way or was this the partial quadrant? I missed that part of the question.
I don't know. Eric, you may want to unmute can you unmute yourself, or do I need to unmute for you? Let's see. If you want to clarify, go ahead. Eric, we don't hear you.
Oh, can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Now we can hear you.
Oh, so I didn't even y'all unmuted me. Okay, so I think it was for both situations, both the quadrant and the one-way situation. I put that in the chat just now, but yeah, I was just curious why there wasn't two right-hand turn lanes there for allowing more traffic to cross the bridge.
So what in this, this is the one-way pair option that I'm showing right now. And here we go at Cross and Queen for you guys who may not be as familiar with what Eric's asking. This is actually a free flow right turn. So you don't have to stop, and that allows for enough capacity that you don't need two right turn lanes. And I believe if we go down, yeah, this one it's yield controlled and it's enough. I think what we found is the traffic volumes in that northbound direction, it's almost split half through and half turn right. So just separating them out a little bit and increase the capacity enough at the intersections that it worked. Oops, sorry about that. Does that answer your question, Eric?
It answers my question, I guess. Agree to disagree. Reasonable minds differ, and I think that just for future traffic flows, you'd want two right-hand turn lanes, but you know, if that's what y'all came up with, then I guess we'll just agree to disagree.
Okay. Sarah Lavica asks, I think this is in regards to the downtown area. How about a roundabout? Did we, how about a roundabout in the downtown area?
So we did not consider that based on space. A roundabout takes quite a large area, and just looking right here, given the historic nature here, it would have taken out a number of these properties to be able to fit one in, especially given the truck traffic having to maneuver through it. So no, we did not consider a roundabout downtown.
Okay. A few comments here that I will read. Margaret says that overwidth machinery, such as farm equipment, is an issue that needs to be addressed. Cyan says, and this is in regards to the downtown options, the options are not viable. You will destroy the downtown area and houses will lose their value. And Meredith says, the new lights are highly sensitive and often go out of sync with interference from storms. This is a huge local complaint. They have no local oversight to monitor this in town to reset this, and the issue often causes vehicle stacking. This was concurred by VDOT of Saluda.
Okay.
So thank you for those comments. This one is about the Winston intersection. The Winston intersection changes have increased congestion at the next northern intersection, and it needs lines.
So my guess is maybe the markings have not been placed yet. I'm trying to get to that intersection. Okay, so here at Winston, yeah, it may still not be marked. That's possible because it's very recently constructed. And yes, it is possible that there is more congestion at the next intersection because traffic volumes shifted, especially to make that U-turn. It's one of the challenges, is making sure that it's a system that works together.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to keep rolling here to read the questions and comments that keep coming in, but I'll also just invite the other panelists, Stephen, Linda, Pavneet, if anyone would like to jump in with a response, feel free to do so. This is in relates to the downtown. Few of the power lines that cross the downtown grid are even close to regulatory height to accommodate tractor trailers. One reason, aside from the turns, that they avoid them at present. We have even set regulations on what we can accept for the Christmas parade because of the lines hanging low across the streets. Wow. And then she says, sorry for all the input. I think the Hoskins to Braze is great, but downtown needs more research and holistic solutions based on existing ground conditions that better consider detrimental impact.
Thank you. We like the feedback.
Yes. Travis notes, and Travis, you may need to help give a little more context to this comment. He says, you cannot get to the plumbing supply store from the parking lot.
Yes,
do you know what Travis is talking about?
Yes, I think he's referring to the comment I made earlier about cross-access connections. Now, if I can pull that up, that'll be, yeah, that you're correct, Travis, you can't actually do that. What we're suggesting is that having those connections could improve conditions, because then fewer trips, if you're over here in this other shopping center, have to go back out onto 17 and then hop back in if a connection were to be made. You're exactly right. Can't be done today.
Okay. Kathleen notes that the survey overwhelmingly favors commuters, that is, those who do not live on the streets that will be impacted. And then she says, secondly, I should not have to find out about these proposed changes through the kindness of a Facebook friend. I think VDOT should hold the local jurisdictions responsible for informing their citizens of these proposals. Don't rely on our local leadership. It won't happen. So thank you for that comment, Kathleen. Okay, Travis raises another question. This is for the section south of Hoskins Creek. He says there's a new hotel at Hobbs Hole Road that is not added. Will that significantly change traffic at that entrance?
Travis, we, in our traffic projections that we based the analysis on, we included the traffic that is expected to be generated by that hotel. Is that the Hampton Inn, I believe? So it has been considered.
Great. Michael Lombardo asks, has VDOT prioritized which sections they would like to work on first, second, and third?
I think I will defer to VDOT to answer that question. However, I would offer that probably not yet.
That's correct. Actually, obviously, we're doing the study to get these alternatives and look into them, get a lot of public feedback, and get us ready to do a little engineering on some of them. But a lot of the choices as to what will be made by the applicant. Say, Jeannie mentioned, the Smart Scale program is probably the most likely way of getting these improvements funded, and they have to come from the local jurisdiction. Essex County would be the applicant for this, and they would have to find something about these that they like, and I'm sure they would work with the department and the residency in particular to kind of vet these through and determine which ones are the most prudent, most effective, and most cost effective, and most likely to score well in Smart Scale and eventually be funded. But we have put no priority on any of these at all. We see value in all three of those locations and in the various alternatives that have been presented.
Hey, Stephen, this is Eric Pollitt, the town manager. Hey, just to clarify for those in the audience, so VDOT can't just unilaterally pick one of these solutions for a particular location and just implement them, correct? Like you said, it had to be from the board at the county level, and they'd have to submit something.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's Smart Scale. And the other funding mechanisms may be able to fund some of the smaller improvements, but most of those go through the same type of process. You have an application, and they are competitively measured against one another, against different, like for example, in Smart Scale, it might be across the district or even across the state. There's two pots of funding that are competed for. So it is very much driven from the local government and the local jurisdictions.
Great. Are we ready to move on to the next question? Yes, okay. Margaret says, farm equipment currently needs to use the shoulders between Brays Fork and Hoskins Creek. How would the width needed be accommodated with sidewalks?
It's a good question. I think the answer is we haven't gotten into that much detail yet with these concepts, but that would have to be a consideration in the design. The users on the road have to be considered and what those needs are.
Great. This is I think Sarah's asking a follow-up question about the roundabout downtown. She asks, what if you moved the historic houses to allow the roundabout? This would have a smaller impact on the historic area.
True. If we could just up and scoot those buildings around, yes, there are many options that would become easier to take care of.
Okay, Meredith has another comment. I'm going to read this. Addressing root causes of congestion would be a better way to mitigate traffic. For example, school traffic. There are about 1,600 people making multiple drop-off and bus trips to schools. Per person, that's between 3,200 and 4,200 trips per day, as a single drop-off accounts for 4 vehicle passengers. The school on Marsh Street only has one way in. That's a lot of pressure on the road that would not be mitigated here. However, it would be mitigated by connecting Marsh Street to Airport Road, which is already a road, just not VDOT paved.
Yes, the school issue, I think, is probably even more so. I know in our area right now too, because there's a shortage of bus drivers, and then there are COVID concerns with buses. So yeah, the school traffic is intense, especially right now. I don't have specific information about that connection. I know that it is something that may be one that VDOT has more history on too, because I know it's been discussed in the past. Feel free to chime in or not.
Louise asks, why is high volume traffic being routed through a historic zone residential area and near a school? Why not Essex Street or a bypass?
I think we may have already covered that with the bypass discussion. And yes, the purpose of this study is on the more affordable and targeted solution side. And it's a really tough spot to figure out how to consider all of the challenges with the historic nature, with the downtown, with the truck traffic, the narrow lanes, and the just sheer volume of traffic going through. It would be nice if there were a really clear solution present.
Okay. Eric, you have submitted several questions. Who's paying for it? What if the citizens like a concept you presented as one of the 3 study areas, but would like to see a minor change? Would STARS or VDOT accept the minor change or proposals as is? Eric, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the questions? It might be easier that way than me having to read them for you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I guess my question is, like, what if, let's just take the downtown area that seemed to have the most discussion. So what if there was a proposal for the downtown that you guys had done, but at the board meeting, you know, you get a lot of people or people there here tonight that want to make a minor tweak to what's proposed for the downtown. Maybe this is more of a question for one of the people at VDOT. Does VDOT take y'all's proposal as concrete? Sorry, my dog's or is it kind of, hey, the people want to do this plan and have a minor tweak to it, to the initial design, and then VDOT accepts that? I was just curious how that process worked.
We would be more than happy, and we'll certainly take into account any information that we receive, whether it's through the chat, through these surveys. All of that information will be compiled. And you can bet that there's going to be something that came out of this meeting tonight that will wind up in some form in some of these alternatives. That's the way we do it. And that's the whole point of this. So certainly we would love to hear it. And we don't think of everything. We've got a lot of good minds on this, a lot of engineers, a lot of good people working for us and with us, and a great stakeholder group. But we are certainly, we haven't thought of everything. So we'd love to hear from anyone else that might have something, a tweak, as you put it there, or something that would really work well. We've heard some of those recently from the folks in town Tappahannock, and that's one of the you know, some other alternatives that we'll be looking at a little closer. So just bring it and we'll see what it looks like, see how it fits.
Great.
Thanks, Stephen. There seems to be a lot of different opinions on what to do with the downtown, so that's why I asked that.
You know, I think one of the things I would want to point out about the downtown area is we all have a great deal of respect for the history and the culture and everything that's down there. And like Jeannie said, we would love for there to be an easy, inexpensive solution, like just to widen the highway, make the corners big enough, put enough lanes in it, it handles it all. And obviously, those kind of things would be tremendously expensive, disruptive. And so you kind of do, you weigh, you know, there would certainly be a cost to the movement of traffic through the downtown area on some of these streets that may be some commercial, some residential. On the other hand, as you look at it as the traveling public, as a commuter through the area, you do have to consider that there are underutilized streets there, streets that have very little traffic, while all this traffic over on Church Street, you know, and Queen Street is just backing up. So there's a balance that we have to reach, and that is very, very difficult because there's so many competing needs, and that's why we hold this. We want to hear everyone's voice.
Yeah, speaking of hearing everyone's voice, Travis asks, is this meeting being recorded, and will it be posted for other people to hear that have missed this meeting tonight?
Yes, it will. It is being recorded, and it will be posted on the project website.
Great. Meredith had a clarification on Commerce Road beside the old airport, and also connect the high school to middle school. Meredith, I'm going to unmute you. If you'd like to clarify, feel free to speak.
Thank you. Yes, there's the end of Marsh Street runs along the old airport to the south, and Airport Road runs along it to the north. They have Commerce Road that technically connects them, but I believe it's either gravel or loose seal or whatever on it. But it is considered Commerce Road. If those were connected, it would connect the bus garage and the intermediate school to the high school. So that would potentially mitigate a ton of traffic, not only for that area, the schools, but also people, coming through there, and Marsh Street residents. But further, there's also the end of Marsh Street beside the Little League field also has the end of a neighborhood road that is right beside it. And if that was connected to that would be another left side road, more residential level, but that would be a residential grade road that people could take a left route all the way to Airport Road without even having to go through town. If they could essentially turn at the town office. There's also was a road that was behind that building that they could technically turn before the town office if that was still there. That was Dock Street.
Okay. Another connection.
So if the ends of those roads were connected, with a sort of just a band road, it would allow the feeders to feed that was, east and west, and it would also mitigate some of those people that are turning out to go ultimately north or back into that area and turn back down Airport.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, can you guys, I'm looking at the map while we talk about this.
Thanks, Meredith, for
the school actually was trying to put together and trying to figure out how they could afford to be able to figure out how to do it. So if it could be something done through, smart funds or however, it would really help, their traffic. I mean, the kids that go to the high school for sports and different things, it just would be far more efficient.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to go all the way through town.
Great. Good clarification. Kathleen asks, how did the issue of traffic in this area come to the attention of VDOT? Stephen, maybe you want to talk about the STARS program and how this corridor was selected.
Sure. Actually, the district planning manager, who's me, is responsible for identifying the potential candidates for STARS, and this was selected. We try to spread our resources around the district, and I know a lot of folks probably look up here toward the Fredericksburg area where the heavy population is and I-95 is, and certainly they get a lot of resources here, but we try to spread them across the district through the Northern Neck residency, Saluda residency, and look at the different areas, and particularly when we look at the VTrans needs that are identified. This overlap of 17 and 360 is problematic, and it will continue to be. We can find some solutions, try to buy ourselves a little time, or maybe get some long-term solutions that'll address this for years to come. So that's what drove this selection of this particular location.
Catherine asks, I'm going to read this comment from Catherine, and then that is the last of our, this will be the last of our written questions. And then I see Cyan has their hand raised. So let me read this question from Catherine, and then we'll call on Cyan. Catherine asks, as I look at these proposals, I wonder if you have included EMS and police in looking at these. I really think Marsh Street is a problem. Some of these turns will create longer times for EMS and police.
So we have not specifically reached out to EMS and police on this. However, one thing that we do know is that, especially using downtown as an example, because that's really the area you're talking about, that any reduction in travel time applies to all vehicles on the road, and that the EMS has the advantage of sirens and being able to get through. And yes, while the turns could potentially add some additional time, the reduction in the congestion probably offsets that, if not, if it's not better, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. Cyan, you had your hand raised. I am unmuting you. Feel free to go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank all of you for, I know you put a lot of work in this survey, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to comment. And the comment is, as someone who grew up here, was born here, we have been talking about a truck bypass, and I do not want to belabor the point. That is a lot of the problem and the backup. You are looking at a small downtown where we've just started revitalizing it. You are looking at making Duke Street, which has a church on it, to Water Lane with houses that people will go down in value. And on Water Lane, there is a school, and they cross the street. And, so this, to have trucks, 18-wheelers, we have a problem with them coming off the bridge, flying off the bridge. It doesn't have anything to do with the road. It's the speed. It is just, we need, if nothing else, a truck bypass. And again, I'm belaboring the point, but you can't take what we've already done and then what Main Street has done, what all these volunteers have done, what our small town, Warsaw has a bypass, Kilmarnock has a bypass. These other counties have figured it out. We shouldn't take what little area that we have and divert all this traffic through it. That's it. So, and I will send my comments to the county administrator and the town manager. So I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cyan.
Thank you, Jessica.
Meredith says she agrees with Cyan. Truck bypass using Mill Road to the side Hospital Road, providing better hospital access, could in the future connect to the new LaGrange Industrial Drive. So, and then Eric says any comments are welcomed. Eric is the town manager for the town of Tappahannock. So great. Okay. I do not see anyone else with their hand raised, and I do not see any other comments coming in. Oh, I spoke too soon. Kathleen, says, Cyan is right. I live on that street. I have to dodge cars to get to my car. I don't want to dodge trucks too. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay. Travis asks, is this the only public comment? And I believe the answer is no, this is not the only public comment. You can submit comments anytime. Jeannie has up on the screen the fred.comments@vdot.virginia.gov that you can submit your comments to. And you can also take the MetroQuest survey to respond specifically to the solutions, the potential solutions that Jeannie talked about. On the MetroQuest survey, it will ask you to give a star rating for each of the concepts, but there is a little icon, like speech bubble icon, that you can click on, and so you can submit your comments for each individual concept, for each individual solution, if you'd like, that way as well. Catherine says, thank you for the information. With that, I would say we can, since we don't have any other questions and we don't have anybody else with their hand raised, at this point, I can open up the unmute everyone in case there is anyone else who would like to speak at this time. So I'm gonna try to unmute everybody. If there's a lot of background noise, I will remute folks, and then you can raise your hand and ask to be unmuted. But let's give this a go and try to unmute everyone and see if anyone else would like to speak.
Hey, this is Eric again. I just want to say thanks for all y'all's hard work. I know y'all have been working on this, and Michael and I have been going to these meetings, and some other people on the call, I'm sure, have been at these meetings for the last 6 to 8 months, it seems like. And I know y'all put a lot of work and effort into this, so just want to say thanks, and thanks for the opportunity for the people in the area that want to give input, that y'all host this meeting tonight.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. And I would like to say that we've really had a good team of local folks that have been involved. It's been very, very helpful and insightful. And again, tonight we're just getting more voices. So it's great.
Great. Does anyone else have a question or a comment or a suggestion that they would like to make? Jeannie, Stephen, should I turn it back over to one of you?
Sure. Thank you. This has been great discussion. This is why we have these meetings, is so that we can show you ideas and get feedback from you, the people who it impacts, who are invested in your community, and have lived there your entire lives in some cases. So we really appreciate your time. We know that you have more exciting things you could be doing on a Thursday night, but thank you for attending and for your thoughtful input. We'd love to get more input from you through the survey. And if you have other things, feel free to share them through the Fred comments and with the other representatives involved with the study. And I think with that, that's all we have for you guys tonight.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Visit the website, take the survey, stay tuned. We appreciate it. All right, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica.